and thank you so much for joining me on this panel. The topic today is exclusive use, real deal or hype. And I think it's been something that's been very much in the background long before COVID. So although it's kind of the big buzzword at the moment, now everybody wants to be in a travel bubble, I don't think this is something that's particularly new for the African markets. And I think testament to that will be some of your stories in terms of those of you that are suppliers, that a lot of this was in the pipeline for long before COVID. And I'm sure from a DMC perspective, you'll be able to speak to the fact that that demand or to operator perspective was there before. So I think we'll just sort of kick off. We'll start off with each of you introducing yourselves. You can tell me your name and where you're from. So we'll start off with Kate.
Thanks, Sue. So my name is Kate Fitzgerald Boyd. I am the head of business development for Angama Mara in the Masai Mara, which is actually where I am sitting today. I'm sitting in the library in one of our guest areas, looking through the glass windows at the beautiful Mara below. I've been with the company since its inception almost 7 years ago, but the lodge has been open for 6. And it's been a roller coaster ride, to put it lightly, from opening in Ebola to surviving through COVID. We've pretty much done it all. So that is me. And last year, as some may know, we launched our first soul use camp. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Thanks, Kate. And then over to Nikki.
Hi, okay, so I'm Nikki Coonan. I'm the Group General Manager for the Last Word Boutique Hotels and Safari Camps. And yeah, so we've been going now, 17 years. We've got 3 Cape-based properties, or 2 sort of in Cape Town and 1 in Franschhoek. And we've got a safari camp up in the Greater Kruger in Klesiri, private nature reserve. And our properties are very small, very, very boutique, very intimate. They're sort of 6, 9, and 10 rooms each. So although not sold predominantly on sole use basis, they can be taken for exclusive use. So although they're sold per room, generally for FITs, we're finding as we go along more requests for exclusive use of the properties. But I mean, beautiful locations, just really, you know, the wonderful thing about them is that you actually can do a combination of the properties, whether it's beach, bush, winelands, and so forth. So yeah, COVID hit us hard, I think, like everybody else. Sure, as soon as you think that we're out of it, it comes back again. But you know what, it's all about, I think, flexibility and being able to adapt and change during these times, and listening, I think, to what consumers have to say going forward.
Very true, Nikki. Maya, if you can also just introduce yourself before we get into the discussion.
Absolutely. Morning, everybody. Yeah, so from Go to Africa, which, as I think most know, but let me briefly describe, we're an online inbound tour operator. Been around for 23 years now, and I've been with the company for 5, and it feels like 3 months, but it's been 5 years. I was quite shocked to realize that myself the other day. Yeah, we are predominantly serving the US market, and we are predominantly B2C. So we deal with the customer directly. And so some really good insights, obviously, on our side, because we really have to get to understand the underlying consumer to know what they want in terms of their kind of travel vision for coming to Africa. Yeah, I mean, I'm with Nikki. It's obviously been tumultuous times. And I think what's really interesting now for us to observe, because we're kind of more at the forefront of the funnel, you know, getting demands, leads online, and we're seeing such a pent-up demand coming from the US. Our leads are really going through the roof, and we're definitely kind of exceeding pre-COVID numbers now. That's kind of only happened in the last 3 to 4 weeks. And it's actually such a tricky time, because we're dealing with consumers who want to come travel, and we're obviously doing everything we can to allow them to come, but at the same time, we're still dealing with what I call the COVID hangover. You know, we still have to understand all the integral and detailed regulations of each market. We still have to understand who can go, who can't go. And we're still dealing with a lot of deferrals and also some cancellations, which I'm sure all of you are seeing too. So our teams are inundated, you know. It's a good problem to have that leads are coming back up, but it's just a point to acknowledge. I think for us as an industry, we're going to start seeing this really weird time where we're dealing with COVID related challenges whilst we're already trying to, you know, book forward for a time where COVID will hopefully not be the first item on our agenda. That's it from us.
Yeah, it's so encouraging though to hear that kind of demand, massive demand out of the US. I think it's just after this last year, that kind of is music to all of our ears. Even though the rule book has completely changed now, and it's a whole new set of questions and new regulations to stay on top with, and I think also it differs per market and per segment. So, you know, what one set of travelers need to know, you need to treat another set of travelers completely differently. So it's really a hectic time for anybody in the business. On that topic, I think it would be great to kind of set the scene of where this kind of sole use and exclusive use concept sat before COVID. Like we said, I mean, I think by just the state of affairs and the need for these kind of bubble type accommodation options, some smaller lodges have opted to turn their places into sole use, but we know that there's a lot of purpose-built type of accommodation out there. I would love to know from you, Maya, just pre-COVID, what kind of demand were you seeing for these type of properties?
Sorry, needed to unmute. So not excessive demand. So effectively, the kind of travelers we would see it from was usually family groups or groups of friends. And when family groups, often multi-generational. I think that's probably what the rest of us are seeing, but keen to hear what everyone else has seen in the past. And then I would say the demand for it less than 10%. So, I mean, we would predominantly book, you know, smaller lodges, and when in cities, larger hotels, smaller boutique lodges, or accommodation or hotels, but exclusively is really not featuring massively on our agenda.
In that same vein, Kate, I know that Ngama Safari Camp, which is a sole use product, was conceived of before COVID was conceived of, before it was something that we knew about. So what was the thinking around introducing a product like that into the market before COVID?
Thanks, Sue. Well, we did have a bit of a demand from our trade partners really to look into the villa style accommodation offering. So there was a big question of, could Ngama build a villa? Again, like Maya, for families traveling together was the predominant request basis. And this was way before COVID. It was way before anybody had even heard the term social distancing. And it was multi-generational families or groups of friends. And we didn't want to build a villa at Ngama. We're pretty maxed out here, although we've got two small camps of 15 tents. Well, they're not too small, but we didn't want to put more bricks and mortar up in the escarpment. So we looked at what we could offer as an exclusive use experience, and Ngama Safari Camp came to life, and now it's hit the sweet spot post-COVID, well, in today's COVID thinking. But having said all of that, I'm at the lodge, as I said now, and there is social distancing, but the guests are FIT travelers in camp, very relaxed, and the guests choose not to wear masks because I think they feel that they've all gone through enough procedures of PCR tests, getting on international flights, getting zapped with a thermometer at every possible direction. Sanitizer is well alive and well in Kenya, and we never saw this coming. But having said that, now I agree with Maya completely. The demand has skyrocketed for exclusive use travel, and I'm sure the charter companies would say the same, because even local flights from Nairobi into the Mara, in our case, there's been an increase that we've seen of guests arriving on private air as opposed to scheduled flights.
Yeah, it makes sense that if you're wanting to travel in that travel bubble, that you're going to want to have that at every stage of the journey. And I think there's a lot of fear, particularly around the air aspect. I think everyone has this picture of themselves sitting in a, full to the brim kind of aircraft, and then that doesn't help even if you're arriving at a destination that's all wide open spaces and fresh air. Nikki, I would love to hear from you, because you're coming at this from a different perspective, in that these were smaller properties that happened to work well as an exclusive use product. Is that right for the most part? So, and how does that impact in terms of adapting the experience that for a lodge that wasn't necessarily purpose built around an exclusive use market?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, as I said earlier on, predominantly we've been focused on FIT, so everything's been on a per room basis. But I think the benefit of our properties is that they are smaller in terms of number of rooms. So we could shift into that exclusive use kind of model, for want of a better word. It's not our mainstream sort of business. Like Maya was saying, it's, historically the demand hasn't really been there. Now you're starting to see inquiries come through, say we want to travel as a group of friends or multi-generational family or whatever it may be, and we want some space that is our own. So two of our properties, without a doubt, Last Word Katara, which is the camp, and Last Word Long Beach, which sits on the beach in Komaki, have the most demand in terms of exclusive use. They are smaller because they're only 6 rooms. So there it's only 12 people in totality. But we're even finding, requests for 8 or 10 people, and they're prepared to pay that slight premium just so that they can have the camp or the hotel for themselves with absolutely nobody else around. Our other 2 properties are 9 and 10 rooms, and obviously taking them slightly bigger groups. The dynamic changes slightly, but we haven't had to change anything, I must be honest. I mean, they love the fact that they have their own bedroom, lovely big bedroom, lovely big bathrooms, everything's en suite. They can come together in the public areas. They can go on game drives and it's just them. They go down to the beach and it's just all very quite private and just, I think, space. That's the main thing for what they're looking for. So in terms of adapting, we haven't changed a thing. It's really just a case of you can either take the properties per room or you can take them on an exclusive use basis. The pricing has adjusted accordingly. And we find that, I mean, both those properties for sure, the weekends at the moment, are chock-a-block with South Africans. So it's not just your international markets that are looking for exclusive use kind of options that are at a 5-star level. It's your South African domestic travelers, which we're relying quite heavily on at the moment, considering day-to-day everything changes. I mean, now we've got more international markets that are not allowed to travel, and we're not allowed to go there. So the South Africans are finding that they actually need to make a decision if they want to do a holiday. It's going to have to be local, and then it is wanting to do it with friends or with family, because they still want that break. And then being able to take over a property on a 5-star basis that still has all the bells and whistles and is fully catered for, and you've got hot and cold running staff, is really what they're looking for. So we've had a fair amount of bookings coming through on that sort of basis, which is great. I mean, for us, it's wonderful. And yeah, as I say, we haven't had to change much, just really kind of, and those group bookings are great, I must say. I mean, not that, the per room basis, you're dealing with different people, but, when you're dealing with a family or a group of friends, they're on the same wavelength, the same page, they're wanting to do things, together. And they're really just, they are fantastic bookings.
It's interesting to hear, Nikki, you were saying which of the destinations are the most popular in terms of this market. And Maya, is that something you're seeing as well, that certain, like perhaps when people are doing kind of a beach or city kind of situation or countryside thing, they want to be in exclusive use, but perhaps on safari where they're expecting the wide open spaces and things to be smaller, they're happier to not go exclusive use?
I can't really say, like, I'm talking purely anecdotal now, so just to caveat that, but I can't say that we've seen that.
Right.
You know, I think some of our guests are choosing to stay at slightly smaller accommodations in the cities, but yeah, safari, they keep on booking as per previous. So I can't really comment on any major shifts and trends with regards to that.
Fair enough. So I would also, just moving the conversation along, I would love to know, I mean, other than the obvious element of not having to come into contact with too many other people in COVID times, Kate, perhaps you can maybe shed some light on what some of the benefits are in terms of opting for sole use accommodation.
Absolutely. So I think one thing out of COVID that has been very apparent is we've all been forced into our homes, spending a lot of time with family and slowing the world down, that being together and taking it slow has become more important than ever. And exclusive use at Angama for our guests that we've seen really does enhance that quality time spent together. You can tailor the day, we tailor our days for all of our guests, but traveling as a group or even just as a family of four, but you're staying exclusively, absolutely everything is on your terms. The way, when you want to wake up, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, and the time that safari gives guests to connect with each other, connect with the world, connect with space, enhances that COVID closeness, if you can call it that, but in a much more relaxed environment. We have seen, as I've said, a big uptick in requests for exclusive use, but I think it's not so much about being nervous about COVID, because otherwise, as we said before, you wouldn't get on the first international flight if you were that concerned about contracting corona. But it really is about spending time together at a gentle pace in a beautiful place that's completely on your terms. And that's, I think, what exclusive use allows, because there's no impact from anyone else, or you don't get FOMO, which is fear of missing out. If you see other guests experiencing, say, our out of Africa picnic, and you're like, oh, we have to do the out of Africa picnic as well, and when are we going to fit it in? If you're none the wiser to what anyone else is doing, you don't care, because everything is structured completely for you and to enhance that time together. And I think that is really what sole use allows our guests, is to dictate their day, be it jam-packed or doing nothing at all. It's completely up to them.
So Maya, you wanted to add something there?
Yeah, I think just one word that also kind of sums it up for me on the kind of exclusive use, sole use, is kind of that intimacy that you can have as a group. So whether it is the family or it's a group of friends, I think that just gets so enhanced when you do have exclusive use. And also, I think the one thing, as you say, Kate, you know, everything's tailor-made for that specific use, but it's also much easier for staff, if they focus on that one group, to get to know the people much quicker and get to understand the group dynamics and get to understand how that group operates, because of course every group's going to be different. And so I feel like it's a better and bigger opportunity to get it right, right up front from the start.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to hear that Nikki say that South Africans have been really keen to opt for this, and it's a great way to get back together with friends that maybe you missed for when lockdown was more severe. I'd also love to hear, in terms of international markets, pre and post COVID, I mean, we've spoken about the fact that it's mostly multi-generational families and perhaps groups of friends, but which countries, which regions are the most likely to opt for this kind of accommodation? I don't know if perhaps Nikki or has some insights to share from outside of South Africa.
Yeah, so I think what we've seen in the past pre-COVID is it's pretty much been certain European countries will travel like that. The USA, we've seen some of those bookings come through as well. And then also some South American bookings where they'll travel as a group. The UK tends to stick to more, well, what we found, more, you know, sort of per room basis. So it's mainly those sort of markets that we found have come and stayed and taken over one of our properties exclusively for themselves. But I think going forward there will be an increase in that. You know, obviously there's a challenge when we sell our properties on a per room basis as well. We don't dedicate them only to marketing on a sole use basis. You know, availability becomes an issue. So if you have a property that is solely done for exclusive use, you know, that's how you sell it. For us, often when those inquiries do come through from markets, we've already got bookings in the system and obviously then can't take an exclusive use booking. So it's not ideal to sit, I don't think, you know, from a strategy point of view going forward, to sit kind of in that role. That's why I said in the beginning, predominantly our bookings are on a per room basis. We're just finding that if you book well in advance, you know, I mean, we all know that the Christmas, New Year issue, it's, you know, availability in Cape Town is just like pulling hen's teeth. That's just not there. If you book 2 years in advance, sure, you'll more than likely get exclusive use of a property. But you know, that's not how we focus it on. We do it, as I say, on a per room basis for future. But I think just on what Kate was saying is, in terms of being able to take exclusive use bookings, the key thing from a property perspective is having that flexibility for your clients. I think, as you say, you know, just to be able to jump and do this for them and move around, and there's no structured kind of like, you will go on game drive now, you will have breakfast at this time, you will do this, you will be back at this time. It's more like, you know what, guys, if you want to go on game drive at 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever it may be, that's entirely up to you. Do you know what I mean? And I think also when you're getting kids involved, that, you know, they also throw a little bit of a challenge in, you know, because they're not necessarily like adults, which can generally stick to a routine, you know. Also, you're not my kids; they're like all over the place. So, you know, you have to be flexible, and you have to be able to just, you know, as Kate says, take it from what your clients want to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's the expectation. I think as soon as somebody is opting to book an exclusive use property, that level of flexibility becomes kind of the new standard. Like, it has to be there. So I imagine once you've got, whether you're a small property that somebody's taken the whole thing on an exclusive basis, or if you purpose designed, there has to be a different kind of mindset in terms of the service offered, because there's this expectation of flexibility. So, I mean, I would love to hear from you, Nikki, and I'm sure the others I would have something to weigh in here as well. I mean, how do you kind of train up staff to know how to handle the needs of these kind of travelers, as well as how do you change your food offering? How do you change your program for the day? I mean, how do you approach that when you're looking at shifting from FIT or per room into exclusive use?
So on that note, the Cape Town property is a little bit more easier, well, a little easier, that's not really good English, in that we offer breakfast at all the properties. So that's quite easy. You know, if you've got a group in house, it's okay, guys, what time do you want to have breakfast in the morning? I think it's absolutely imperative that at each of our hotels, that the management is in constant communication with guests, just to find out what they're wanting, how they're feeling, you know. So if they want to have breakfast later or brunch, you know, at 11 o'clock, you know, that we can do. We are a small team in each unit. So it's not like we're dealing with loads of staff. I mean, it's, and the staff are, how can I say, our staff are not hospitality per se trained. Okay, so they don't come from a background where they've maybe worked in a big hotel and they have that kind of inflexible sort of mindset. Our staff come from the communities surrounding us, and they've all been trained from absolutely nothing. I mean, I think like many remote areas, you take from the community, you employ the passion, and you train the skill. So they have learned just through that. They, you know, they've never been in a very, very structured kind of environment. They've always been quite flexible, and that's for us is quite key in terms of the hospitality that we offer at Last Word Properties, is that it's very much, you're only looking after 12 guests, you know, at Long Beach or Katara, even on a per room basis, you know, so it's not like it's a huge amount of people that you're having to deal with, that you have to have too much structure in place. When it comes to Katara, obviously, very much, you know, there it's kind of like some days we'll have guests that say, look, you know what, we really don't want to get up at 5 in a group, that is. And there's no pressure to get up at 5 and go on game drive by 5:30, 6 o'clock, because you're not letting anybody else down who might be staying in other rooms. The group can either move as a group, or it can move as 2 people or 4 people, those that want to go on game drive, those that maybe want to lie in. And just being able to, I think, also just maneuver around the day. You know, our staff, as I say, are, you know, constantly chatting. You need to chat to your guests. You need to find out how they're feeling and what they're wanting to do in order to be able to kind of plan the rest of the day with them. What will happen sometimes with us is you may be out on drive and you come across something special, you know, a leopard on a kill or whatever it may be. And because we are like sort of literally the only lodge in that area where we are in Kasiri, we can take as long as we want. So we're not going to get rushed off any game drive. So again comes that flexibility and that adaptability. We can sit there for an hour with the guests. There's no pressure to get back to suddenly, you know, make sure that dinner's, you know, not getting ruined because the chef's having to wait for the guests to come back. And that's where moving as a group sometimes becomes a little easier, you know, rather than the worry that maybe as a guest, if you're there, you know, you're going to let down other guests that are staying at the same time. Maybe they want to have dinner at 7. But I think that's a roundabout way of answering your question. I think, yeah, what's key is communication throughout. You cannot, especially during these times, you cannot get away without talking to your clients and constantly to your staff to ensure that you're on top of everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, you know, there's, I mean, this need for greater personalization in terms of what people want to do, and tailor-made stays is something that exists inside and outside of this exclusive use space. And is not, again, something that is, especially when you're talking about the higher end properties, there's definitely that expectation. I suppose it becomes more of a challenge when you're dealing with a remote location, and perhaps Kate can weigh in here, because I know that if somebody is going for an exclusive use option as a family, for example, they may want to eat very specific things, and how important does it become to kind of get a feel for your client before they've arrived on site?
Well, for us, Sue, no detail is too small. We're very fortunate that with one property and a tiny bit, because Angama Safari Camp is only 4 tents, and this is the big sister. We love detail. The more we know prior to guests arriving, the better we can be prepared. For us, in terms of how we shift and change our offering for exclusive use, at Angama Mara, let's say every meal is a la carte dining, always has been. At Angama Safari Camp, it's family style dining. because it's just one group. So it's a lot more interactive with the guests. It's all laid out on the table. Everybody helps themselves because you aren't sitting next to a stranger. You're comfortable. It's all part of the experience. Again, when it comes to children, I agree with Nikki that mine are also uncontrollable. But at Angama Mara, we have a minimum age of 6 and over, whereas at Angama Safari Camp, we have no minimum age because there's no impact of small children on other guests. So we can let them have run of camp because it's their camp, it's their home. There's nobody panicked about, you know, what is the other guest? There's a honeymoon couple here. They don't want to be around a 4-year-old. So we've been very, it's been a really fun experience, seeing the differences that we can offer between an FIT experience like Angama Mara versus a sole use experience like Angama Safari Camp. And food is made easier, as Nikki said. You know, if we've got the dietary requirements ahead of time, which is always key, it's easy to surprise and delight guests, especially as a group, because everything is just magical. And as Maya said, it's you do get to know the group that much more intimately because our camp host is looking after 8 guests, whereas at Angama Mara, he could be looking after 30 guests. So it really is getting to know every detail about that guest if we don't have it already. So that's where we rely very heavily on our trade partners to just inundate us. But as I said, it's easy for me because I've only got one baby to look after here, as opposed to a bigger flag where there are 17 lodges or more. No detail is too small and we love it. So for those listening, please send detail with your clients.
Yeah, and I wonder, I mean, it's in a, you know, you've got the kind of the follow through that Angama was already about detail before the advent of Angama Safari Camp. But I sometimes wonder how these properties package together. And Maya, I would love if you could weigh in here. Is it feasible to have a group staying at an exclusive use or a couple of exclusive use properties and then mixing it up with shared accommodation, for lack of a better word? Or does that kind of set a kind of precedent for a level of personalization and attention to detail that maybe they may feel disappointed when they go on to shared accommodation when it's not all about them? Or is there a clever way to do it that you kind of structure the trip so that these happen at the right point in a stay? I would love to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, to be clear, just because someone stays exclusive use on one part of the itinerary definitely doesn't mean they need to not do that throughout. So I think it goes back to Kate's point about really understanding the group well, and then also with that kind of mixing and matching the itinerary in such a way that it fits to their expectations and to their needs. So even though they'll be staying exclusive use in one place, it certainly doesn't mean that they need to do that throughout, because there's so many other experiences that can be had, as long as you really have listened to the client and made sure that they get everything that they would like to see and experience. And as long as you also manage expectations appropriately. You know, again, it all boils down to you having often long, detailed conversations with the people on the other end. So we always say how important it is as part of the sales process, if I can just use purely like technical terminology here, you know, to really get down to the nitty gritty of knowing who that client is and how you can serve them. So I think, I mean, my personal opinion here is the more you can mix and match along the framework of the client's kind of needs, the better experience they're going to have, because they just get exposed in so many more ways, you know, to Africa as a whole, depending obviously exactly on where they travel.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess it also comes down to that kind of information filtering through the different channels, which I know sometimes can be a challenge in the industry, because you often have a lot of different players involved. You guys being direct with the customer a lot of the time probably makes that process a lot easier. But I know sometimes it can be challenging if there's multiple players in the system. Sometimes that detail can get lost. And then it results in an experience once they arrive at potentially their exclusive use accommodation where they feel like, oh, but I told them that I, wanted this and I didn't eat this, and now I'm being presented with a plate of something that's not for me. So I think again, it's just making sure that that information gets fed all the way through the channel down to the ultimate supplier of the service. I think that's pretty much in a nutshell, but I would love to get some final thoughts from you, all three of you really, about where you see this going in a post-COVID world. Do you think this is kind of where people's appetites, they've got to experience it? I think South Africans potentially getting to experience something like this for the first time where they may have not considered it in the past. Do you think we're going to see sustained interest in these kind of options? Or do you think this is something that we will go back straight into how things were pre-COVID, where there was like, you were talking about 10% of requests were looking for this kind of accommodation. Where do you see it going in the future? We could start with you, Maya.
Yeah, I mean, just to tackle the South Africans, my view on that is that as long as South Africans can't really travel freely overseas, they're going to use their travel budget to experience places here that they normally wouldn't, because they kind of supplement that travel budget with, going the other grand places, if I can put it that way. And suddenly now they've actually been forced to look inward and go, wow, there's so many amazing places to see in South Africa, and I can't really go anywhere else. So absolutely, it makes sense to allocate that travel budget that they would have used, let's say higher end for skiing or for a trip to India or whatever, here, and do exclusive use, especially on the safari side of things. I personally believe that once the world opens up, some of that's definitely going to whittle away. But what is good is that South Africans would have been more aware now of what they actually can do here, and maybe, we'll come to some kind of a halfway where in future, because of that awareness, South Africans will more likely maybe spend a family trip in exclusive use safari or a villa somewhere rather than going somewhere else in the world. Finally, I think just one point for me is, we spoke right in the beginning around exclusive use versus a lodge that sells on a per room basis. I think one thing we probably need to get better at is making the client more aware that they can actually go exclusive use on a small lodge, and just creating, that space for them to know that it's an option. Make them aware, because they actually aren't aware. And then obviously you need to make sure you book far enough in advance, to your point, Nikki, to get the availability. But I think we can do a better job at creating that awareness, and allowing people to know, look, you're 8 people in the group. Do you actually know you can take the whole lodge if you're willing to pay a little bit more and take all 10 rooms or 9 rooms? And really like moving on that point, because you can make the experience so much better. Again, to the point of charter flights, like we had a situation the other day where we had, I think, a group of 8 or 10 booked, and they were booked on a commercial flight, but they could have actually booked a charter for cheaper. And I think we managed to turn it around in the end. But for our consultants and the people at the forefront to kind of put that cap on and look at a booking or a request in a slightly different way to see how can we make it super optimal and how can we delight and surprise a customer. And I think that's to the point of exclusive use. Make sure you think of that all the time, and how can you bring that into a sell, especially when you're dealing with larger groups of people.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And it also comes just straight back to that point of that importance of somebody who isn't familiar with the destination working with an expert, a safari expert, who can look at their group, get to know the group and say, I know exactly what is going to be the right fit for you. You're just shy of being able to take this whole camp and it's not going to cost much difference. Whereas if you're trying to wade into these waters as an individual, I imagine it's completely overwhelming. So it just speaks back to that importance of working with people who know the destination incredibly well and know that, you may as well charter because you're actually going to be paying less. Nikki, your final thoughts on where you see the exclusive use trend going in the future years?
Yeah, I think Ma's right in terms of, I think when the world reverts back to some form of normality, we will see per room bookings, I think, be the driving force in most of the business. But having said that, I agree that I think it is just going to take a little bit of not skill, but a little bit of a change in terms of how you sell. And exactly that. I mean, we may have 6 rooms at Katara, but I can tell you, if you've got 5 rooms booked for a group, and then you have that 6th room booked by another couple, it gets quite a challenge from an operations perspective, because your group is together and tends to be, you know, perhaps a little bit more rowdy or whatever it is, and that has an enormous impact on that, on the 6th room, if I can put it that way. So what we tend to do is then try and say, listen, you know, can you rather get them to take all 6 rooms? We can work out something. You know, it doesn't have to be at full rate. You know, we're happy to negotiate that 6th room with you guys, so you can go back to your client just to explain that. Because it is very much looking at how those dynamics work when you have groups versus that one room of a couple that may be celebrating something special, and how you manage that. It's a lot trickier at the end of the day. It's not insurmountable, but it's not ideal, if I can put it that way. So I think, you know, just from that point of view, it would be beneficial to just say, listen, guys, why don't you, even though you're 10 of you, I'm using numbers as an example, they're 10 of you, the lodge takes 12, just take it exclusively, and you can actually do what you want. It's yours for your 3 or 4 nights. Have fun and enjoy it. And I think, you know, with guidance from expertise like, or people that, you know, like our trade partners, certainly that is where, as I say, the guidance is going to come from in the future. We as a property, you know, we can train that, and we can tell everybody, look, you can do that, but it is very much looking at the booking and saying, actually, you know what, let me go and ask last word if they can make a plan here, or whatever it is. And I think that's key for all of us going forward, is being able to work together on bookings and inquiries to obviously get those conversion rates up. And just as I say, we're here to help each other at the end of the day. And, you know, working together is paramount, I think, going forward. So I don't think there's any reason why exclusive use won't continue to be popular going forward. Availability is a challenge if you don't sell a property solely on that basis. And then the size of the group. You know, it's not always that you're going to get 10 or 12 people traveling together. I think in Kate's case, you're more than likely going to get 6 or 8, you know, and then when you have those sort of smaller lodges or hotels, that also works really, really well. Sure, I don't know. Let's see what happens in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to say about where you see it going in the future, demand for these kind of products?
Absolutely. So I mean, I agree both with Maya and Nikki, but for us, I definitely see a continued growth in requests for multi-generational travel. That's never going to end. I think it's becoming more and more important to spend time together. Is it necessarily going to need to be sole use? As Maya said, that's where they rely on our trade partners to know the clients really well, to be able to match and have a smattering of the experience throughout. For instance, for us, we are so pleased that we have Angama Safari Camp, which is sole use, but if we were to expand, I don't necessarily think we would only build more sole use experiences or accommodation options, but it's nice to be able to say to our trade partners, if you want FIT, we've got X. If you want sole use, we've got Y, and you mix it as you see fit. And that's completely up to our trade partners knowing the guest. So I don't think that in any time soon we'll be rushing to turn Angama Mara into a sole use experience, but it's nice to be able to offer both. And hopefully it's not something that grows with anxiety out of COVID, and it's just more about quality time rather than health, because I think that's what we all hope and pray is going to happen coming out of this.
Yeah, and I think absolutely agree with what you say. I think it's about this richness of experience that you're able to offer guests. So it's just another product to the mix that makes this kind of African safari and beach and whatever else you're going to do on the continent so special, because you do have this vast range of types of accommodation to choose from. And then once again, just comes back to knowing that group, knowing that customer, knowing that client, and what is the perfect fit for them. So thank you so much, ladies. I think at this point, we're going to go into the Q&A. So thank you for your time, and it was lovely to speak to you all.